Hi, my name is Jane Ann Gonzalez. My project is called Triangle Girls. It's a limited series that reimagines the events surrounding the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. My main character, her name is Samara Wasserman. She is a brilliant Jewish immigrant who dreams of higher education, but her dreams crash when her mom gets sick and she has to quit school and go to work basically in factory life of the Lower East Side of New York in the turn of the century. The story actually unfolds over two timelines. So we have the main story actually happening in 1945 when Samara is middle-aged. She's a survivor of leaving Russia in a young age, crossing an ocean, experiencing the loss of her mother, experiencing the factory fire, World War I, World War II, and seeing the rise of anti-Semitism, labor exploitation, but then also a growing movement for workers' rights. So by 1945, she's a survivor, but she's carrying decades of guilt, and it's a speculative fiction because the story imagines that the fire wasn't an accident, and she knows who lit the match. So it's really more about the stories that we tell each other as Americans and what we need to do to call ourselves Americans. My audience is people who are fascinated by stories of history, and we really need to remember who we are as Americans and not allow revisionist history to take over. So in the story, we have actual historical figures like Clara Lemnick. I think she should be a household name. But other figures such as Frances Perkins and Mark Twain makes an appearance. So it's really about immigration and dignity, economic equality, and the question of who gets to be called American. So my goal as an artist is to tell stories about people who are often overlooked by history, even though it's those people who have shaped our history. My work explores identity issues, belonging, social justice, and I think I get a lot of that inspiration from my own roots as a Puerto Rican writer and the daughter of an immigrant, working class parents. I've been fascinated by stories of immigration and laborers who built this country. And I believe that storytelling like this builds empathy for all groups of people by helping audiences recognize themselves in these stories. So Triangle Girls is rooted in a very specific Jewish American experience, yet the themes are universal. So the series asks audiences to remember that their families also arrived here under very difficult circumstances. And we all together collectively contributed to the fabric of American life. So these stories of Jewish immigrants in the Lower East Side in the turn of the century is not separate from the American story. It is the American story, and I'm really hoping that this lab will help me become a stronger steward of history and historical fiction, because there's always going to be audiences for it. As I mentioned, I am not Jewish. However, my main character, who is a composite figure of real people who lived in this time period, is Jewish. And the real people who are portrayed in the story, the Triangle Girls, many of them were Jewish. The factory owners were Jewish. They spoke Yiddish. The girls, ironically, for the first time, had more autonomy and freedom through factory work because they were able to leave the home. They had their own money. They had their own friends. It's an exciting time, actually, to be a woman in this time period. It's the paradox of the story. So I want to tell this story because, and I also want to apply to the Jewish Writers Institute because Their story needs to be remembered, and I'm in contact with the Remember the Fire Coalition, which is a board, many of whom are descendants of the Triangle Girls. And it would be a great way to honor their memory with accuracy and the complexity that it needs, and of course, respect. Thank you.